is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 252, migration update and more. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Thanks for joining us. In this episode, we're going to update you on our internal project to migrate Talking Drupal from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. We're going to see how that's going. And I'm Stephen Cross, and joining me today, as usual, is John Picozzi from OMPH. Hey, John.
Hello, internet friends.
What's going on, John?
Oh, man, so much stuff. So I don't know if the internet gods heard me or listened to the show and deemed me worthy, or it's always been there and I just didn't see it. But I found this past week that Zoom now has a saved meetings feature on the join screen. There's a little caret in the meeting ID window. You drop it down and it shows you a list of all your previous meetings. Awesome. So now I don't have to go looking for the Talking Drupal ID when I need to join the call every week.
Wow. I can confirm, John, I was just looking at the analytics. The internet gods are listening to us every week.
Oh, well, that's good. So internet gods, I appreciate you taking my feature request and turning it into an actual feature. Now, as I said, whether that's been there all along, I just didn't see it. I don't know. The other thing is this week, my AC died, which is unfortunate. But in our never-ending conversation about home automation, I was able to go out and buy a new air conditioner, which was Wi-Fi enabled. Let me tell you, it is amazing to be able to turn on your air conditioner from your first floor when the air conditioner is on the second floor with your smartphone. It's great.
And that's provided from an app from the vendor,
yes,
right?
It is the LG Smart Talk app, I think, where if you have a bunch of LG products, you can have them all in this app and you can turn it on, you can change the settings, you can see the room temperature, you can do all sorts of fun things.
So I actually also smartified, I guess you could say, my mini splits, but I went a slightly different route. I got a Wi-Fi enabled IR emitter, and so you can connect to any device that uses a remote control, and so then you just kind of teach it the codes for. So in my case, I have one in my living room, and it can control my soundbar, my TV, and my AC. And the advantage is if I get a different AC, for example, I can just teach the new codes and it will work. However, I mentioned this because recently a bug has been introduced where when I turn it on, it will send the message 5 times. And so my AC beeps every time it gets a command. So when it gets hot, I turn it on, it's like beep, 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 and then it comes on. So I have to work that bug out. But yeah, that was one of the first things that when I automated, I was like, oh my God, this is one of the coolest things ever, being able to not have to stand up and go across the room.
That is super awesome if you think about it. More so the IR receiver, because like everything runs on, well, pretty much everything runs on IR. So you could set up like unlimited possibilities there. You could automate.
Yeah, it also does RF. And they're not too expensive. I'll look it up and I'll put a link in the show notes.
Where does the device have to sit, Nick, in order for it to work?
So it has, most things are line of sight. Right. So in my case, I mounted it to the wall. The only issue that I've seen consistently is that some commands, I think, are at a different frequency than others, so they have more trouble. So ironically, the on command and change temperature command works perfectly for the AC, but the off command, sometimes if the curtain is in the way just right,
so
it won't
positioning
work.
Could help that.
Yeah, but having it positioned in a certain way, my wife didn't want it completely visible. So to solve that, when I put the one in the bedroom, I did it when she wasn't here.
That's what you do.
And so the one in the bedroom has really good positioning.
Right.
and already had holes in the wall for the screws, so
Couldn't be moved.
it didn't have to be moved. This one, she was home when I put it up, so I had to put it in a more hidden location. So it works 95% of the time, and when it doesn't work, we just have to kind of shift the curtain a bit and hit the button again, and it works.
Mirrors. You could install a bunch of different mirrors.
That actually,
That's an interesting idea.
that might work.
Huh.
Yeah, I have to think about that. I wonder if that will work for RF too. Probably
No.
I don't know. Actually, you know what? I think it's an
RF is
IR.
radio.
No.
It's a
IR
different
is
frequency.
IR is light. Radio. RF is radio. So
Right.
anyway,
Yeah. So anyway, that's definitely a fun project to automate. Yeah, I agree.
So, Nick, is that your update for this week, or do you have something in addition to that? And this is
I have
Nick
something in addition.
Laughlin from Enlightened Development.
So I have to thank Stephen for helping me walk through an issue yesterday. It's always interesting when you run into an issue with a variable or a setting that you didn't even know existed. And I have a client that consistently runs into these. So I had a client on Friday send me a message like saying, hey, this page, we can't save it anymore. And so I figured that something just kind of happened weird. It was a very large page. It's a new page. It's an older Drupal 8 site, so it uses paragraphs pretty significantly. And I confirmed it. If I saved the page, it would just refresh the edit page. It wouldn't save it. There were no errors in the logs. There were no validation errors. And interestingly, one of the nested paragraphs, if you tried to remove it, instead of removing the paragraph, would remove the siblings. And which was obviously bad because it removed a lot more data than you were trying to remove. But interestingly, if you then saved it, it didn't save that removal. Like everything would appear back. It was very strange. Pulled it down to the development environment, same behavior. Pulled it down to my local, everything worked perfectly.
Ding.
Did some research over the weekend, could not find, and the site has like a gig of memory. I mean, they're on pretty beefy servers, so it wasn't running out of memory. You know, I restarted Apache, restarted Varnish, could not figure it out. So yesterday morning, I asked Stephen if he could take a look at it with me, start running through it, decide to check the logs one more time for Apache. And I saw a message that said, you're exceeding the max input vars of 1,000. To increase this, increase max input vars. I was like, couldn't be more clear than that. So I tried it out. I increased it from, it's the default in Apache is 1,000. And apparently it controls the number of form elements that can be submitted in PHP. And this page was so large that it had more than 1,000 elements. I uncommented the default and set it to 2,000, and the page started working again. So if you have a situation with a lot of forms and it's just not working, take a look at max input vars. The only other thing that I kind of thought about this was Drupal must be doing something different with permissions, because the permissions page certainly has more than 1,000 checkboxes on it. So I'm kind of curious how they handle that. They must do like a partial.
So like submitted form values though. So like all of those checkboxes. Well, I guess
No,
all
because
of
when
them
you
could be
save
submitted.
No, when you save the form, it checks every box to see what's set or not. And this was another interesting thing that I haven't chased down.
Was the edits they were making to this page, was the page all of a sudden larger than it had been in the past? Like were there more
creating a new
paragraphs?
page. It's a new page, so they've been adding stuff.
Okay.
And when they hit a certain limit.
Okay.
The other interesting thing, though, that I found is, though, it was failing on the Ajax update for the paragraph as well.
Right.
So what that tells me is when you do an Ajax action on a page, it's doing something with the whole page. It's not interacting just with that individual paragraph that you're working with. Because otherwise, removing an individual
Ajax
paragraph
always does that, right? In Drupal, it always reprocesses the whole form in a different state.
Yeah, but I would have thought that, if you had a nested paragraph and you were removing like the lower level, that it would just update the parent entity, which is just the paragraph above it. But apparently it updates all the way up the chain. I guess it makes sense because it needs to know the new hierarchy. But yeah,
the other lesson there too is always like when you have a problem and you go to describe the problem to someone else, you often figure it out as you're describing it, right?
Yeah, which
is sort of what happened. I was just asking Nick some general questions, and all of a sudden he was like, "Oh yeah, wait a minute, let me look," and boom, I really did nothing other than listen to him talk for a few minutes. So you're welcome. Though.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Honestly, this is one of those issues that I had that, if we hadn't found that, I would not have known where to begin.
Yeah,
figuring out what was going on. So that was my weekend. And also joining us as usual is Steven.
Hey.
What's new with you?
Not too much. Last week I mentioned in the show that I had installed Graphene OS. And I wanted to give a little update to it because I've been now using it as my primary phone for a couple of weeks, I think. And I'm actually shocked at how well this thing works. Did find one issue with it so far. The camera, when you swap the camera from front facing to back facing, it crashes. I looked up on GitHub. It's a known issue. The guy maintaining the project is aware of it and basically is like, hey, if anyone has time to look at this to help me out, please help me out, kind of thing. Battery life has been amazing. One of the things I wanted to bring up is that one of the ways I was able to transition to using this phone and just having my iPhone with no SIM card in it sitting on my desk, is that and I kind of did this when I switched to Linux too. The primary apps that I depend on, I switch over to non-Apple specific products. So our family doesn't use Apple iMessaging. We switched over to Telegram maybe a year and a half ago. And one of the reasons for that was so we could be cross-platform. My daughter's now using an Android phone, so we can all still have group messaging and text each other. We just use Telegram. So one of the ways I was able to sort of get off of the iPhone, I'm not saying I'm getting off permanently, but at least temporarily, is because text messaging is probably the thing I use most on the phone. I hardly ever make phone calls. And I use Telegram for that with my family. And those are the people I primarily keep in touch with.
You mean you're now a green text box?
Yes, I am no longer a blue text box.
Oh, yes. Gosh. And so only iOS users.
I have no idea what that means. I've never been on an iPhone. I assume it's something special with iPhones.
So when you use iMessage on an iPhone, if you're communicating with someone else on an iPhone, they don't use SMS service. They use their internal messaging service, and the message comes through as blue. If you're communicating with someone through iMessage and it's green, do I have the colors the right way? It means they're not on an iOS device.
So can you not text with Graphene?
Yes, I can, but I can't group message. So we already have. It's harder to group message if you have group messages cross-platform. That's not easy to do. If you ever have group messages on iPhone and you're one person in the message is on an Android device, sometimes they get the messages, sometimes they don't. It's weird.
Yeah, and if you add MMS, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah, so that's why we switched over to Telegram.
It's interesting because I've never had an issue with different types of users. It's always just been hey, there's one person on the thread that's an Android. Now it's everybody has to use the text messaging system. The only issue I've ever seen with that is image resolution on shared images and videos.
Yep. Sometimes they come through as stamp size.
It's interesting because when I talk to my sister-in-law and soon-to-be brother-in-law, he's on an Android and she's on an iPhone, and sometimes they'll be watching the kids and they'll take a video, and I'll be like, I'll text my sister-in-law, I'll be like, can you resend that video because Brett's phone sucks, and anyway.
And the other surprising thing so far for me is I thought GPS would be a big problem. There's something called OpenStreetMaps, which is a open source GPS system. and it works great. It's not Waze. You don't get like the real time. If anyone uses Waze, you don't get that kind of thing. But it seems to be a fully functional, very feature rich mapping system with GPS, and it's free and it's open source and it works fantastic from what I could tell. I haven't traveled further than 15 miles from my house with it, but it's interesting. So I'll keep you guys updated over time, see how that goes. So let's move on to our stories of the week. First thing here is really more just a notice, public service announcement. Our Jeff Geerling, who's been on the show a few times and is a longtime Drupaler and has provided some great tech service and insight to the community, has a YouTube channel that you should go out there and just search for him. He's been producing more videos lately on YouTube, on his Kubernetes, on some Drupal stuff, on just some tech stuff in general. And he's like really amped up the production value of those videos. So this is hey, if you're a Jeff Geerling fan, which I think a lot of people are, check out his YouTube channel.
It's
a lot
interesting.
Of interesting stuff there and entertaining videos.
It's interesting. I feel like a lot of people, now that they've been at home for longer, they're finding that they want to get into the podcasting and the video creation. I know Matt Glomman from Centauro actually reached out to us via Twitter and was looking for suggestions for microphones. So I imagine he's going to be doing some videos or some podcasting or something. So it's interesting to see all these folks kind of jumping on the media creation bandwagon.
Yeah, I'll have to check out his videos. Yesterday, another unfortunate but somewhat interesting thing happened, which you don't see all that often
anymore, right?
Yeah, anymore. T-Mobile had a nationwide outage, and it wasn't just kind of like a partial outage. Apparently, the phone just didn't work. Like you couldn't receive or make calls. And I think that it was most people. I have T-Mobile, and I tried to call my wife who also has T-Mobile, and the call wouldn't go through. But it looked like you had service. It just didn't work.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it shows you how little like people in our industry may use their phones. Because I think everybody on this call before we started the recording here said that they had no idea that the phone wasn't working until either their significant other told them or I had posted it in our group chat. And I know that was true for me. I didn't know that the phone wasn't working until my wife came up and said, "Hey, my phone isn't making phone calls." To which then I did some troubleshooting and then finally decided to Google it and found that there was a tweet from some high level official at T-Mobile saying like, "We know there's a problem. We're working on it."
And it didn't get solved like 12 or 13 hours, right?
Yeah, it didn't get solved until 1 a.m. last night.
It wasn't fully resolved until this morning, I found. But I wasn't checking it every 15 minutes. But yeah, it was weird because at our house we don't actually have great cell service, so we use T-Mobile Wi-Fi calling. And you would have thought that like the Wi-Fi calling would have worked because it was actually using the internet, not using the cell phone network. But nope, that did not work. That did not work either. So, yeah, it was really interesting.
I wonder if it's something with their SIM routing that was out then, because
there's the article that we're referencing from The Verge says that it was some sort of IP issue, but it doesn't go into much detail because I don't think anybody really knows what it was. And there was some hypothesis that it was some sort of DDoS attack, but I think they quickly disproved that.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see kind of what kind of information comes out about this in the future. I mean, one of the interesting things about telecoms is that even though phones themselves keep kind of improving, the tech behind it is horrifically bad. ancient. And so it'd be interesting to see if if it was related to that or if it was something else. I'll be curious to see what kind of information they provide.
It's also interesting how comments and Twitter puts a spin on these things, because I was going to Down Detector to see like what was going on, and the outage spike was huge, like in the afternoon, obviously, but the comments on there were like kind of ridiculous, where people were like, they just merged with Sprint and this is what we get. This is the kind of service, because like, I'm sure they just
a contract was signed somewhere. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you know what though? It could have been if they have the same IP spaces internally. Then
I'm pretty sure this wasn't like, oh, we just signed with Sprint, let's flip this switch and look, our whole network went down. Whoops.
You'd be surprised at how often that kind of stuff happens.
No, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that happens all the time, right? But it was very interesting to look at like Twitter and to look at the comments on certain websites and just see people kind of completely losing their minds because they couldn't make phone calls. So our next story actually comes from Microsoft through GitHub, and GitHub is actually going to replace the term master with an alternate term to avoid the slavery reference. Now, this is something in our current world, our global situation, that is kind of top of mind for everybody, and GitHub is I say GitHub, but I really look at this as like Microsoft is basically stepping up and saying, "Hey, we're going to make this change," and kind of setting the tone. But when we first were talking about this story, Nick pointed out that the Drupal Association actually made a similar change. What was it, Nick? 6 years ago?
Well, let me clarify. It wasn't the Drupal Association; it was the Drupal community. And we have the issue in the show notes, but the issue was originally created in May of 2014, and I think was finally updated in October of 2016. And it was following on from a discussion in the Django community. I think they were looking at leader versus follower, and Drupal settled on primary replica.
So I'm curious about this from a technical perspective too, as I'm thinking about this. Is this affecting new projects moving forward? Or like if I have a branch, which a lot of people do in GitHub that's called master, is that name changing?
I think the way that they are focusing on it is, I think it may affect projects going forward, but I think they're also looking at it from a kind of a UI perspective and changing all of the references within their UI to master. And there were a couple other terms, I think, if you read the article from ZDNet.
Yeah, and
they're changing the terminology.
Yeah, GitHub's not going to change any projects, but what they can do is, they have how-tos on how to set up a new project. They can change the default.
So, and also maybe when you create a new project, it creates a master by default.
Yeah, exactly. And now
that would be
it'll
different.
change it.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll change it to whatever they choose as an appropriate term. Yeah. And you could always push, I don't think they're going to gate what you push up.
Right.
So you can always push up whatever branch you have.
I mean, you have to
whatever branch name you want. Yeah, it's just their default, right?
Yeah, I think you got to think like a lot of people have CI pipelines built around this stuff, and a lot of like testing and all that stuff. If they just arbitrarily decided to change this on people, it would definitely be catastrophic for a lot of folks. So I think this is the beginning to a really good conversation, and it gets it in people's heads that they may need to rethink how they're thinking about things.
And I think one of the interesting things too, like you said, it's a good discussion point, and it's something that institutionally can be changed. But you look at some of the comments on, the original Django discussion. There's people very vocal on both sides, and I just think it's interesting how tied to terminology people can be. Regardless of the historical context. But I think one of the interesting things is as usual, or maybe I should say as usual, but like in many cases, Drupal has had this discussion already, and made a decision 5-6 years before other communities are looking at this.
Good on you for Drupal for being a trendsetter. That's why we love you.
All right, let's move on to our primary topics, plural, for the day. First one thing. So it's been 2 weeks now, or a week? 2 weeks since Drupal 9 came out?
10 days.
10 days? Okay, we'll call it, We'll split the difference. We'll call it 10 days. So Drupal 9 came out. I'm curious, guys, has anything changed for you guys in terms of, I'm interested in oomph, big release, big major release when you do like big number changes, like 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9. Those are like big monumental things, right?
Yep.
This one was kind of like, to me, is like a dun dun dun. It's like a what? Did it happen? What happened? I actually had a customer reach out to me and say, hey, I see Drupal 9 is out. Where can I find the list of new features? Where is it? And it's like, well...
That was a really anticlimactic email.
Yeah.
You're like, there are none. Isn't it great?
But I take that as a extremely encouraging look, because Drupal 8, we spent 2 or 3 years leading up to it, like every couple of episodes talking about how Drupal 8 was coming. It took a significant amount of time to change how we thought about projects from 7 to 8. It took a significant amount of time before documentation caught up. You would I remember for a year or two, you look up, a form API thing, and you just get Drupal 7 after Drupal 7 after Drupal 7 example.
But Nick, what you're trying to say is when you actually don't release any new features, it's really easy to keep up with the documentation and stuff. Yes, I agree.
Well, yes and no. But what I'm saying is the two things are, one, the Drupal 8 project has had momentum since it started. Every 6 months, new features come out. So it's not like we haven't had new features. And second, it's really encouraging to me how this went out, that the plan for the migration is actually going to be what they said it is.
Right.
We have to, I manage a couple of projects. And so the Drupal Rector bot commented on them saying, here's what you need to do to update it and be ready for Drupal 9. And literally all it did is say, I need to the info file, I need to add space pipe space 9.
Right.
So I have to just say my module works for 8 or 9. That's it. Right. Now, the truth is it won't work because it depends on paragraph. This particular one depends on paragraphs, and I'm sure paragraphs itself needs a lot more changes. But I'm hopeful that I'll be able to update all these sites to Drupal 9 rather seamlessly. And that means that we'll get, all the benefits of being on the latest version of Drupal without, we're no longer going to do the leapfrogging where, okay, this site was built in Drupal 8. Well, it's going to be in Drupal 8 for 5 years until Drupal 10 comes out. Or this site, now that Drupal 9 is out, all the Drupal 6 people are really starting to think about moving to 8 or 9, and Drupal 7 are just starting to think. So, the fact that it was semi-anticlimactic is actually really encouraging to me as a developer.
Yeah, now, I'm happy about
9.1.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here, but I'm super happy with the way it's going. I agree with the plan. I just was thinking about this from a marketing perspective, how challenging it is for a company, we'll call it a company, an organization or a product like Drupal to have a major number release and actually say there are no features in it, which is what the page says.
But I think there are no new features. But I think that's how. I think they solved it by not pushing it.
Yeah, but I mean, people know. People in the Drupal.
People notice. But I mean,
USA Today. But people in Drupal know about it, and it is challenging to say, "Hey, there are no new features." It's interesting. It's not a place we've been, and it was a fascinating question that I had to answer. And I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, there are no new features.
I'll get back to you in 6 months when 9.1 comes out.
Right.
It's new and it's different, right? The Drupal community isn't used to this sort of change where it's like, what's the change? The change is there isn't really a change, but there is a change.
Right. You just can't see it.
It's this weird space, exactly, where you're like, there are no new features, but We've taken out deprecated code. We've updated Symfony. We've made a lot of changes under the hood that will benefit us all throughout Drupal 9's life.
Right.
I think, as Steve said, new features will be coming in 9.1, and there is a roadmap somewhere in Drupal.org of features that are slated to come out in 9.1. So that's something that you can be excited about. And, I think that something to keep in mind now, and, we're going to talk about this a little bit when we talk about the Talking Drupal migration, is that, you want to get your sites up to date to Drupal 8.9, right? So if you're on 8.7, I actually just saw one of our developers comment today that I guess 8.7 is end of life now that 9 is out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're on 8.7, you want to get to 8.8 or 8.9 in a pretty quick cadence.
Have you guys upgraded to 8.9?
Well, funny you should say that. Yeah. I just updated the Talking Drupal site to 8.9 over the weekend.
The live one? The new one. Yeah, the live one's
not
7.
The live one.
Yeah.
The new one that we're working on. Right. So, I did do that, and it was, it was a Drupal upgrade. It required some jostling of some things to get it to work. However, I will say, had I wanted to go straight to 9, I could have done that with literally one composer command. I had gotten up to 9, and I was like, oh nope, too far. I got to go back. So I think, overall, I'm very excited about the Drupal 9, and it'll be interesting to see exactly how easy it is to get from 8.9 to 9 when your site is ready to make the leap. Yeah, I mean, there's still a little bit of trepidation. I'm still a little bit nervous because I haven't actually gone 8 to 9, but I think my bigger concern, honestly, is for at least the first 5 or 6 point releases of Drupal 8, paragraphs was the way to go. And while paragraphs aren't going away, generally layout builder is the way to go. And so I'm concerned that as we move forward, paragraphs gets less support, which means that you'll need to do some sort of migration away from paragraphs at some point. I stand by my previous comment that paragraphs is the new field collections. Oh, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, at least paragraphs uses the entity API. Well, right, but that's what you're going to use it for going forward in Drupal 8 is field collections. Oh, yeah, functionally, yeah, it is. Yeah. It definitely is, and that's what I've been using it for. I have a project that I'm working on right now. No, I was not comparing paragraphs to field collections in any stretch of the imagination. I just want to be very clear on that. I've spoken on the topic. I'm just saying. Very good. I would also like to point out, I wouldn't be doing my shameless self-promotion if I didn't, that OOMPH has a great webinar on getting ready to upgrade to Drupal 9 and all the differences and what you can expect. So a link to that will be in the show notes. We will also be putting out a blog post in the next couple of weeks about some upgrade, how to upgrade to Drupal 9 and what those steps might look like, more specifically for a developer looking to upgrade modules and stuff like that. So still making Game of Thrones references even after season 8. Well, yeah. Now we have to burn all those T-shirts because 9 is here. It's not coming. So those are like antiques now.
You should check out the blogs on OOMPH. I love it when I'm doing Google searches on Drupal issues and I run into a webinar or a blog post from OOMPH, and it happens to me quite often. You guys must be producing some content because I've been seeing more of it in the last few months than I have in the past. We do produce a fair amount of content, and it makes me extremely happy to hear that you're finding it. Hopefully a bunch of other people are finding it, and more importantly, hopefully they find it useful. So most recently, I ran into one on accessibility, a blog post that was super fascinating. I shared it with a bunch of colleagues. It was really excellent.
Yeah, we actually just did a guest blog on the Pantheon blog. Jay Hogue, our director of UX, did a guest blog about color contrast and color accessibility. So you can go to the Pantheon blog and find that there as well.
Great. All right, let's move on to our next main discussion for today, which it sounds like all of our discussions are main topics anyway. So migration. So we had an episode. We should have put it in here. What episode was that? We'll put it in the show notes. Don't know. It was like 15 ago, 10 ago, 2 months ago, something like that, that we talked about migrating our Talking Drupal website from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. And it's like this team internal project here that it's a slow burn when we have time now and again to work on it.
I will say, for me, it has been quite enjoyable because my job has shifted from development, day-to-day development, to more account management and client relations. So enjoying jumping into Talking Drupal and still doing some development work.
That's great. So where are we? Where did we leave off last time? We kind of left off last time where we were just talking about the project in general and hadn't done a thing on it yet. And over the last month, there's been a bunch of things done on it. So let's talk about where we are and like the major steps we took. The first thing we did.
So
go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the first thing we did was we mapped, and I don't see it on this list here because I don't think we discussed it since then. We mapped out the old content types and the new content types. And they haven't changed all that much. The site is generally very straightforward and not complex, right? You can sort of look at the website and draw the content types in your head, right? What they would be.
Yeah.
Nothing too complicated there. I think it's more of us getting rid of things that we weren't using and cleaning up, making it a little maybe more straightforward in the new design.
Yeah, simplifying the content model and connecting more pieces of content that make sense to be connected so that we can use them in views and whatnot later on.
Yeah, like mainly I think like hosts. We also renamed a bunch of things. I think shows in the old site were just article content types with a couple of fields added. And we're looking at creating a dedicated show content type. And
for anybody wondering how we did that, I'm going to disillusion you right now. It was literally a Google sheet. Nothing crazy, nothing complex, just a Google sheet. That was it, with some tabs.
I also wanted to mention that I looked up the other show, and believe it or not, it was actually 6 months ago.
Was it?
Episode 231.
So at that pace, 13. We'll have a new website on Drupal 8 by the time Drupal 10 comes out.
I think our goal actually was to have this live in July. So we're probably not going to hit that.
Yeah. Things changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we get some changes, I think, that will speed things up.
So one thing I wanted to bring up that's not on here related to the content types, it's not in our notes to talk about, but I wanted to talk about it. An interesting thing when the sort of three of us come together here is that we come from different development shops with different strategies and different standards, right? So one of the very first things that happened was, hey, we're going to create these new content types. We get into this little back and forth about how to name them, right? That Vic has a naming convention he uses. John has something he uses. I have something I use. Where did we end up with all this?
So, all right. Well, I'm going to... because we're on the air here and I want to be fully transparent, the content types I created originally. So I created content types probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. Originally, I used Nick's naming convention for the fields. I created one additional content type this weekend, and I created one field on it, and I did not use the naming convention because it was a weekend. My head could not handle the underscores and the naming convention, and so I just threw that out the window.
So
we can't do that. We can't have one field that doesn't match the naming convention,
That's the whole
John.
point of a naming convention.
All right, fine. I will go back. I'll go back and redo it.
All right. So what is the naming convention?
By the way, I'll explain the naming convention. And so, I'll preface it by saying one of the reasons why I do this is to help prevent, especially in the config management age.
And when you're going to preface it, it's because you preface everything.
Yes, I think I do.
Which is what you're doing at the naming convention.
Yes. So I do this especially in the config management world to prevent conflicts. So what I do is I have the entity type, then some information about the bundle, and then information about the field itself. So for example, if it's a node, then I'll do, field underscore CT for content type. If it's an article content type, then it would be, field underscore CT underscore article, and then whatever the field is. So if it's a text field or a body field, it'd be, so the whole thing would be field underscore CT underscore article underscore text, or body or image or whatever. And the reason is, you have images. If you have an image on 4 different content types, many people would just say image, but then the second content type has to have, the content type image. Or if you add a second image, what do you call that? The only time I make exceptions is usually with date fields or taxonomy fields, just because that makes it a little bit cleaner on the view side for building views that combines them.
I would like to hear from listeners on this, because the reason that
let's give the concrete example though. So pick a field, and what does the field name end up being like? So we have a content type. Give us an example. Like we have an episode content type. What does that field name look like?
So we have the episode content type. One of the longer fields in there is an entity reference to the podcast audio. And so the label for it is podcast audio. And then the machine name for that field is field underscore CT underscore EP for episode underscore podcast underscore audio. So that means, so every field on the episode content type is prefaced by CT underscore EP. So you always know. So the other thing that helps with is if you're creating a view or writing some code and you're looking at a list of fields, you don't have 4 intro fields and have to figure out which one is for which content type. Already, CT underscore EP is for the episode content type. And so you can pull it out of the list.
I can understand that. I think, Drupal is going to prevent you from naming a field that already exists. It's also going to allow you to reuse a field very easily. And I think views even tells you which content type the field is used on. So there are things in the UI that help you pet through that. I will admit that as I was renaming each machine name, because obviously Drupal does not do this by default, there were very strong words about Nick and his ideas. I'm just saying. So anyway, as I was saying, I would be interested to hear from listeners. Reach out on Twitter or email us, and let us know what your feeling is on naming conventions for fields. Because
I mean, the truth is, Drupal allows you to do things many ways. This is one thing though, where this is unequivocally the right way.
I would say so. My 2 cents here is I think if this approach makes sense for large, complex projects, it might be overkill for content types.
Yeah,
I agree, because come Saturday, I was like, I'm not doing it. Forget it.
So to be fair, one of the reasons why this really became a practice for me, there's 2 other reasons why this really came out. One, I have a couple of projects that use paragraphs heavily. I mean, they have 50, 100 paragraphs, and a lot of them are very close. Like they come out very differently on the front end, but the back end, they look very close to each other. And if I add an image, not having to be like, okay, what did I name the 50th image field that I have? I just know it's, PG underscore whatever the paragraph type is underscore image is a huge time saver. And the second thing is, when you reuse a field, you have the base field and you have the overrides. And so if you have an override, or, changing overrides between fields sometimes does not go cleanly.
Right. But this really isn't a discussion about whether you reuse fields, right? Are you saying you would never ever reuse a field?
Oh, no.
No, okay,
I mean,
right,
I do reuse them occasionally
Sure,
when it's necessary.
Nice,
But
right, okay,
when I started out with Drupal,
yeah,
I reused every field I could.
right, yeah, and then
As you should.
I would disagree
Yeah,
very
I disagree.
strongly with
Oh,
that.
me
let's
too.
not go down that rabbit
let's not
hole.
go there because I disagree with that
Yeah.
too. All right,
Yeah, that's it.
Where it makes sense. All right, where it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll throw that caveat in there. So I would like to note that I did have a note about our content types in here. It was just at the bottom of the list, which didn't make a lot of sense.
Okay.
I reordered it.
all right. So we mapped out content types, and we got
Yep.
those in place. Then what was the next thing we addressed?
So we had we had some infrastructure that we added, right? So we moved to a GitLab repo. Previously, Steve, what kind of version control was this in? Was it in GitHub?
It's in GitHub. It's in GitHub, but yeah, it's just in GitHub.
So we moved to GitLab because that's kind of what Drupal.org is moving to, and we figured that we would use that to kind of kick the tires on that a little bit and see how that is.
Is that a public repo, by the way?
The existing one, I don't believe so. No.
I don't.
No,
think it is.
the new one, the GitLab.
No,
I don't believe
think
so. We could
Okay.
open it up at some point here.
Yeah, I think that might be interesting.
So using GitLab's tools is pretty cool. It's pretty exciting to kind of use a new service. At OOMPH we use GitLab, so or I'm sorry, GitHub rather. So interacting with GitLab is great and gives you some exposure to something new.
Yeah, I actually use GitLab. I started using GitLab maybe 6 or 8 months ago because one of the Docker containers I was looking at using for my home automation projects was using GitLab, and I needed to contribute something back. So I created an account, created some merge requests, and found it pretty easy to use. For this project, it was my first experience using the GitLab CI workflow. So similar to GitHub Actions, I think GitLab has a built-in CI. It's a YAML based, kind of like Circle CI, or most of the CI workflow organizations out there. And within a couple of hours, I read through documentation, set it up, and it currently automatically deploys to Pantheon when a commit is merged into master or pushed into master.
That's fun too, because I worked on the site Saturday and didn't really know what to expect. And like, you get just like, git push. And all of a sudden in GitLab, it's like, oh, I'm working on it. And you just see like the wheel, and then you see all the steps, and like, that's pretty, I mean, all the CI and platforms kind of have the same sort of thing, but you never really know what to expect. And it was really cool to just see it kind of working on it. It's like, oh, I'm working. And you see all the steps that, it's going through to push out the code.
So Nick, did you run into any particular problems setting this up, or just a little, first time doing it, understanding what's going on?
No, there are never any problems.
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean, a lot of it was just, this is the first time I've worked with it. I did run into one issue, which I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but when you're working with Pantheon and you're doing CI, you have to basically, and you want to use Composer properly, you basically have to, as your CI workflow, you have to run Composer, and then you have to change your git ignore file, and then commit all the files and push that to Pantheon, right? And for some reason, GitLab CI isn't recognizing that the git add function is still running, command is still running, and it starts the next step. And so it tries to take the next step before the git add is finished, and so it kept failing. So I solved it with a wrench. I just put a sleep command in there for 15 or 30 seconds, and also changed the git add from the the script running to the before script. Seems to have fixed it. The other thing that I the other half of this that I did, which I've never used before, but I've known about for a long time, is I wrote a Quicksilver script for Pantheon. So people that work with Pantheon, many times you can't just have Pantheon run the Drupal stuff that you need to run when you do a deploy. It's not automatic. It doesn't run database updates unless you check something off. You have to use Terminus, or you have to, have Drush interact, and sometimes from an external tool that takes a little bit of extra work. So Pantheon has this tool called Quicksilver, which again is a YAML-based thing. You put in your Pantheon YAML file, and you can hook into the different Pantheon processes and have it run a script. And so I added a script that did, the Drupal stuff that we need. Runs updates, clears cache, imports, config, that kind of thing, and then set it up to run after the code syncs. And
so let's go through the general workflow. I've got a new config that it's in my local, which John, you're using Lando, I assume. We're using Lando, right, for local development. You're going to push some new config. What is the workflow of that process?
So right now, since it's just the three of us and we're developers, we're not following, a really defined workflow. So we're not doing like a merge request workflow or anything, but you merge it into master and push it up, and GitHub CI takes over at that point. As soon as GitHub CI sees a new commit in Git on master, it kicks off a build.
He means GitLab CI.
Yeah. Yes. I think that is going to be something I will say consistently.
Yes.
Over the next.
We'll just dub it. We'll just
automatically replace.
Yeah. So, what the GitLab CI does then is it does a little cleanup stuff. It grabs an SSH key that I added to both GitLab and Pantheon as an environment variable. It sets some git config stuff like the username and email that it's going to use. It checks out the master branch. It installs the zip and unzip programs, and then installs Composer. It runs which I could probably skip a couple of those steps by just finding a better base Docker container, which is on my list of things to do. But the container that I was using didn't have it. It installs Composer, and then it runs Composer install. Once that finishes, here's a quick tip. It runs Composer install with the flag ignore platform requirements, which is important when you're doing CI many times, because many times, like the version of PHP that the CI platform is running on is different than Pantheon or your local.
Right.
And even though you have a .lock file that basically says use these versions, it will try to sync it to whatever version platform it's on. So if you use the ignore platform requirements flag, it'll install explicitly what you have in the .lock with no errors. After it does that, it swaps out a get ignore file for a Pantheon specific one. And then we have a post Composer install hook that then goes through and deletes all the .git subfolders in vendor and contrib, so that Git can see them, and then adds all those Composer files to the Git repo, and then it commits those files and does a forced push to Pantheon. Pantheon receives that, and after the sync code step finishes, it runs a script that I wrote that, just like I mentioned, clears cache, updates PHP, updates the database, imports the config. Although that portion does not currently seem to be working. So I have to learn a little bit more about Quicksilver.
So we sort of got ourselves set up with new content types. John has built out the new database structure. We got some infrastructure in place for actually working with the hosting provider. That's sort of where we are. What are our next steps now?
So, I think next, we are going to, Nick's going to start.
Take a 4-month break.
Yeah, take a 4-month break.
Well, next, I mean, over the next 6 months, Nick's going to be working on some migrations to migrate the content into the new site. Steven, I think, is going to be working on a theme. So that way our site looks good, because right now it's just using Bartik. Not that Bartik is bad, but it's not on
using Bartik.
It's not on Talking Drupal's brand. That's what the front end theme is. Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Yep, sure is.
Yeah,
sure is not. It's not using Bartik.
The site that we're working on right now is.
Is it on 7?
No.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Drupal 7 site.
Steven, get your head out of the Drupal 7 project. This is the future, man.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually it's using Bartik on the front end, but it's using Claro on the back end. I made that change over the weekend.
Okay.
After our conversation couple episodes ago with the maintainers of that theme. And I think once we have the content migrated and the theme in a good spot, while that's going on, I'm going to be working on with Steven on some a view to populate our podcast feed, so that all of that stuff comes out of the Drupal database and gets sent out to all of the various services and whatnot. And then once we have all those things together, we might be ready for prime time. I don't know. We'll see.
So now that Drupal 9 is out, is that impacting anything that we're doing differently, or that we planned 6 months ago?
So this is interesting, because we talked about Drupal 9 at the beginning of the show, and how it's kind of changed what we're doing with clients, and we actually took the same approach with this project that we took at OMPH with Drupal 9. So early on, we talked about like, hey, do we want to do this in Drupal 9? And the three of us agreed that we would probably stick with 8, because it would have, everything that we needed to get a website out. And then when the time was right, we would upgrade to Drupal 9. Over the weekend, I did also install the upgrade status module, so we could kind of keep an eye on our Drupal 9 readiness. I will say we're pretty close. There is only 1, maybe 2 modules that need some updates in order for us to be Drupal 9 ready. But
I mean, we only have, I think, 4 modules that are in contrib
right now. That could increase, but so right now the site's pretty lean and mean, and is almost Drupal 9 ready, so that's good. But no, the idea is to stick with 8.9 for now, and then we'll upgrade to Drupal 9 once the site is live, and everybody's seen the new greatness.
So a couple quick questions here. Any reason we would not create a public URL to the new site, and so someone can look at it as it's getting built? I don't think so, other than no, I don't think so. I just most of the test content in there is from the current site, so yeah, I don't see any reason why. If somebody wanted to take a look at our dev environment, they couldn't do that. The only thing I would caution against there, which could easily be solved with a robots.txt file, is opening the site up then allows it to be crawled. That's why it's not public right now. Okay, so we could think maybe we'll do that. And also, any reason we wouldn't make the repo public?
Just in the off chance that we inadvertently add some sort of API key or something like that.
We would do that in the proper way, though.
We would do that in the proper way. Yeah. Well, actually, we would confer and argue for an hour, and then we'd
the proper way.
We'd figure out whoever won and go with their way.
I think this is an argument we've had in the past as well.
So I don't.
I thought we already had it, and it was already public when I brought it up.
Okay.
I didn't mean public. That to be.
I don't think it is public.
I didn't mean that to be a gotcha.
I don't actually know. I mean, we should have done some advanced research on this before. Let's see.
Because I thought we had. This is interesting. Okay. Well, we'll check into that.
This is going to be a great use case in how I find out if this is public or not.
Yeah, I was actually, the only thing I was concerned about is when I was reading through the documentation to set up the SSH
it does
keys.
appear to be public. I am in I'm non-logged in and I can see the repository. So I guess it is already public.
So are the keys out there, Nick, that we need to be concerned? No, we would have been told to shut it down.
No, for the SSH keys. So the SSH keys that I added when I was reading the documentation, it said, so you have to echo it into SSH add so it'll work. And there was something that said that this will make it visible, even though it's just an environment variable. But looking at the actual output of the builds, the key's not there. So I think we're
all right. So this show, as we're recording it, we'll have like 3 days to just make sure we're clean. Make sure there's nothing.
And the link to the repo is now in the show notes.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. Wow. So we're probably looking at maybe this could be coming live when Drupal 9, when 9.1 is coming out. It's probably the time frame we're looking at now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would think if we're in that time frame, I think we're probably going to be on 9, I would expect.
Yeah, so we need to keep a close eye.
We're not going to upgrade. We're going to push out 8, 9, and then we'll do an upgrade after the fact.
I hear John is committing to the Drupal 9 pledge that this site.
Am I muted? Is this thing on?
Drupal 9.
All right, guys. So that's where we are. So anyone who is interested, and it's a little project we're just kind of working on the side, which is fun. I've been mostly in the background over the last couple of weeks with the technology build. And I'm thinking about where I'm going to go with the theme. I don't think the design.
I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting because over the years, we've all worked together on projects, but I don't think the three of us have worked on anything together. Like all at once.
Exactly.
Like I've worked with John, I've worked with Steven. I'm sure you guys have worked together. But
there was that one time. Long ago.
Oh yes. The time not to be mentioned. All three of us worked together.
We all worked in an undisclosed location for a Saturday.
Nick doesn't remember.
No, he doesn't.
No.
You can tell. He does not. He's like, what are you guys talking about?
I have no idea. Though you'll have to.
Eventually, you were compensated for it.
Oh, I remember now.
There it is. The light bulb just went on.
I remember
folks.
now. Okay. Anyway, it's good to be working with you guys again. Then
Right.
It's funny because I was actually thinking that we should pull a weekend session sometime in the near future and bust out some progress, but we'll see. We'll see what if the world landscape allows for that.
Right.
All right. Well, if you have any questions or feedback, or you want to comment on Nick or my's naming strategy for fields, you can reach out to us on Twitter @TalkingDrupal, or you can email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can also get show updates by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
we'd also like to take a moment to thank our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. The support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron. And patrons get access to the raw show, which comes with a little before and a little after show.
We also have the videos coming out on YouTube now, so check out our YouTube channel. You can find us easily. Just go to YouTube and search for Talking Drupal. We're there. For those of you who are interested in privacy or anti-Google or anti-YouTube, we are also releasing our shows on Library, so you can find us there. Just search for Drupal. I think we're the only guys you're going to find at this point. So our shows are being watched there too. The numbers are going up. It's really interesting. Anyway, that's it for 252. Thanks, guys. John Picozzi, where can people find you?
You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org @John Picozzi, and you can find out about Oomph at oomphinc.com.
And you, Nick?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Cross with a PH. And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. Later.
See you guys next week.
Bye.